and it should not have any problem doing it, cooling the house down. But this one doesn't like it anyway. All right, welcome everybody to Talking Niagara this morning on July the 8th, with myself, Peter Giblett, and with Mike Cushman. Mike, how are you?
Morning, Niagara. How are you?
Yeah, so this morning we're going to be discussing this state of the and a few other things, the state of the Welland River. So basically, you said that you sent out this message a while back that said basically since about July 2nd, probably longer, there's been an oil sheen on the Welland River, and the people who noticed it first of all were were kayakers.
Yes, and they've followed it for about 2 kilometers and can't find the source. So they phoned the ministry last Tuesday. They made a report about the oil sheen, and the ministry came Wednesday, and they couldn't find the source, and they never came back. So I went out there Sunday, and I did my own investigation, and in about 10 minutes, I found the source.
Okay.
So I reported it to the ministry, and nobody came Saturday. Nobody came Sunday. Hopefully somebody will come today. But that there's a stream right by the Humane Society that's releasing an oil or a coolant of some sort. And it's got a sheen right through that pond, right through that stream. And it's going right into the Welland River.
So it's coming from the Don Murray area.
Yeah, the pipe comes from Don Murray.
Yeah, but you see, hey, don't I remember that there was a similar thing about 3 years ago?
Last summer, actually.
It was last summer.
It was last summer.
But last summer there was a white
substance.
Pardon me?
A white substance coming out.
Yeah. But you traced it back to a plant, and they weren't aware that there was a runoff going out in the wrong direction.
Actually, it was the city of Niagara Falls doing construction work.
Oh.
And they were flushing out something through the sewers right into the ditch that leads to that area.
Oh, okay.
So they had a fire hose hooked up coming out of the sewers that was spraying into the ditch that feeds that area.
Oh no! So it's the same. It's the same gully.
It's exact same gully. Yes.
Yeah.
Only this time it's an oil substance coming right out of the pipe.
Yeah.
But the ministry showed up, couldn't find the source, and just left.
Yeah.
How do you just leave? I don't understand how they allow an oil sheen to keep happening, because downriver, that oil's got to be accumulating somewhere.
Well, the thing that bothers me is like, well, okay, it may be innocent. Let's take it for a moment that it is all innocent and it's just cooking oil or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. Which wouldn't do anybody any harm, or may not do, wouldn't do us humans any harm. That's not to say it wouldn't do some animals some harm, right? But and let's assume for a second that the release is innocent, right? Well, you'd still want to know where the heck it's coming from, wouldn't you?
You want to know where it's coming from, and you want to stop it. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
You're supposed to alert the people there's a problem here, unless they're doing it on purpose.
And let's put most people on the park up there. Most of them don't want to pollute their local area, do they?
No, you won't hear me. You won't hear me spouting off about that. I just want it stopped. I'm not after anybody. You know what I mean? I just want it stopped. And I always treat it as an accident unless proven different, right?
Well, that's exactly it, because things happen. You're looking that way, and right behind you, where's the problem lies, and you just don't even glance back, do you?
And environmentally, people really have no knowledge. They have no knowledge.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. I'm happy that the kayakers and the people that found it made a report, and then I made a report, and then Saturday there were 2 reports put in by me and another woman. And then yesterday I made another report. I phoned the Toronto hotline instead, thinking maybe Toronto will do something instead of if Niagara Falls isn't going to. So, right? So I
Yeah,
phoned the Toronto hotline, and then I rode out there last night to see if anybody did anything, and they still didn't do anything.
but again, part of the problem that we have there is, okay, the ministry is only 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, right?
Not supposed to be. There's a 24-hour spill hotline that I called on Saturday, and there was still no response.
Yeah. Okay. Did you actually get a person on that spill line?
Yes.
You did. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. That's
yeah. And I spoke to a person yesterday too, and the lady from Toronto, she said, "Oh yes, there's several complaints about this." I said, "Well, why isn't the ministry doing what I just did? It only took me 10 minutes."
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand.
You're famous, but you should be employed by the ministry to find this shit.
Yeah, it would be a job that I could do well, that's for sure.
Yeah, but again, then you could do well in this area because you know this area.
Yes.
Right. And no disrespect to you and your detective work, but you know this area extremely well. You know where to go poke around. You've got your suspicions as to where to go poke around.
Well, I got all the maps. I got all the maps of where the water flows.
Yeah.
So I know where the water flows. So it helps a lot when you know where the water flows.
But then again, if you were to go to the the outer reaches of Hamilton, an area that you weren't familiar with, you'd probably not find it.
Tell you the honest truth, I would. I have a knack for finding where the water flows, and I have a knack for finding contamination for some reason. It just sometimes I'll go out for a walk and just shake my head. Why am I finding this here?
Well, I think there's some obvious areas where you know why you're finding things there, right?
Yes.
We know of like Park Street, hey, Paul Lemire's famous crater.
Actually, Park Street was a shock of how much was there. I didn't realize that it was used by the city as a service center before also. I knew that the train cars across
the street. The train cars, but not the service center.
Yeah, I didn't know the service center was there before.
Yeah. Well, welcome, Randy West. Good morning. Good morning.
Morning, Randy.
Right. I'm with Mike. He should find what he's looking for. He's putting in the effort. Yeah. 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 In fact, actually, you should almost be the, if the city could club together, they could pay you a salary to do this, couldn't they?
I really wish that I didn't have to do this, and I shouldn't have to do this. It really disturbs me that they tell me the ministry went there, so I just figured I don't have to do anything. The ministry's going to find it, right?
Yeah.
How do you not check all the release points of where the water goes along the Welland River if you're looking for a release? Because there's a lot of pipes and there's a lot of streams along the Chippewa Parkway, and I know where all of them are. Why doesn't the ministry?
Yeah, and the thing is, where they are upstream of that point, don't you?
Yeah, I started at the railway bridge and worked my way down, and I found it at the Humane Society.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just went to every release point where I know there's a pipe and where I know there's a stream that goes in. I just went to every release point and checked it.
Yeah.
It took a half hour.
Yeah. And actually that's fair comment about that. But you see, the Welland River is kind of history about bad bad issues, doesn't it?
Yeah, but we had the Norton, we had Washington Mills and Cyanamid Welland factory that released stuff in there on a constant basis for 100 years.
Oh yeah, but I'm not talking about ancient history. I'm talking about more modern times. It still
Well,
has
even today, Washington Mills has their wastewater treatment that goes right to the Welland River there. It runs right
yeah,
along Stanley Avenue, straight down to the river, and it's active today.
yeah, yeah. So how much of that is releasing poisons into that river?
Well, see, that's our problem in Canada is we allow the private sector to police itself, and we don't have a government system that governs. They allow the private sector to police itself, and our Ministry of Environment are merely consultants, basically, and they don't even have a lab to verify anything.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
frightening.
it's always bothered me. I think that the you know, one of the roles. I'm not in favour of big government, right? Let's be blunt. I'm not in favour of us having civil servants for having civil servants' sake, but I do have a problem. One of the things that I believe we do need to do as our governments need to do is set standards, and those standards then also need to be, of course, policed,
Yes,
and to a large extent, policing of anything, um, it's like you've got a crime. Hey, you pick up the phone and you say, "There's a crime at number 53 opposite my house," right?
yes.
And the police should respond, right? The the reporting of crime or any kind of wrongdoing normally goes upon the citizens who are suffering, may not be suffering, but witnessing it, suffering it, etc., etc. So they're the ones who bring it to the police's attention, or to whoever's the overseer's attention is. And I'm not saying this is a crime. This is most likely just completely unaware, but it's something that needs to be sorted. And
I
part of the
think
problem,
I think the crime, Peter, is that our government's not acting upon reports
yeah,
from people
well,
that care,
that's
right?
what bothers me. Yeah,
I think that's the crime.
yeah, that's what bothers me, because I looked up this. Okay, and I know that the Welland River goes beyond the Welland River is one of those oddities because it goes beyond the canal, doesn't it? Welland Ship Canal goes
Yeah.
both sides of that Welland Ship Canal.
Well, see, don't
Um,
forget we also have the hydro canal too, right? The
yeah,
Welland River feeds the hydro canal for Ontario Hydro.
yeah, that's
So
true.
right now, Ontario Hydro must be noticing some oil coming onto their stuff, and they should be making a complaint themselves.
Yeah. Well,
They have to notice because it's got to be going down there, right where it forks to go to the
yeah,
hydro and then goes down the Welland River. The sheen goes both directions, right?
yeah,
The
yeah,
people that were on the boats told me that it goes pretty far down the river. So now the question is, where's it all accumulating? Probably in a small stream somewhere, right?
yeah. Well, and this isn't the first time we've got problems on the Welland River, is
The
it?
Welland River has PCBs all along it from Ontario Hydro. It was the first canal from Port Robinson down to here was the very first Welland Canal, right?
Yeah,
Um, and Ontario Hydro had PCBs built all along there. Cytec, which was Welland Cyanamide Welland Chemical, it was also called. They dumped there for decades, and Mike Dickman took them to court and won in a court of law $1 to shut the pipe down that was harming the teeth in snails. Believe it or not, that's how he won in a court of law, and probably the only guy that ever defeated one of the richest corporations in the world. And all he
he only
wanted
got
was
$1.
he knows how dangerous they are. He didn't want money. He just wanted them to shut the pipe down, right? So that's what
Yeah,
he asked. He asked them to shut the pipe down and asked for $1.
yeah,
God bless him. What a genius. I just wish that we would follow his leadership and do more, because all the phosphorus
well,
there's supposed to be a
that
lot of
actually,
phosphorus in the Welland River, right? And they
that
blame the
actually brings
farmers.
up that actually brings up an interesting point there, Mike, because one of the things, okay, so just to let anybody know that, hey, if you want to do this, feel free that going to court is actually a potential solution and may actually get the company to stop doing whatever it is that they're doing if you can find enough evidence, right, as this particular gentleman did. Now, the issue still remains, though, is what's the right court to do it? And the right court is actually the Superior Court, the Divisional Court, and not small claims, for example.
Right.
Right, because small claims only has the power to grant monetary awards, not to cause a person to close something down.
Yeah, I find a huge problem in the court system is if you take a corporation like the Cyanamid to court and you make it about real estate, then that's all it becomes about. And then they don't have to fix the problem. They'll pay you the money without admission of guilt.
Yeah.
And it happens all the time.
Yeah. Well, and that is the nature, of course, of the court system. And, in fact, I was talking to a corporate lawyer a long time ago in England. And he said one of the pieces about what happens with corporate lawyers is, let's say that you are claiming $100,000 from that company, right? Because they let you go wrongly, or wrongly fired you. So you're suing them for $100,000, and basically the corporate lawyers, on the type of retainage, which is $10 an hour, but the more that you settle for, the more of a the less you settle for, the more of a bonus you get.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So let's say that you're claiming $100,000 from that particular company, and that lawyer's on a bonus scheme. He's actually probably going to be saying to you, yeah, you know what, Mike, I can give you 5. That's all my company's prepared to offer. If you're really not get any better than that at the court, right? Because he's about to walk away with $95,000 if you say yes.
Right. And then they don't have to admit guilt on top of that.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the kicker, is that all the argument gets totally thrown out the window because the settlement has been made and you don't have to admit guilt. And that's a crime in itself, because if, let's just say it was a pollution problem and they paid you for your property, now they don't have to clean it up. They just pay you for your property and walk away.
Okay, so Randy makes a point that policing costs money. Poor management of local resources disconnects the fines and income from the services that services cost policemen.
Yes, and we don't have labs to verify anything. Do you know the Niagara Regional Health Department doesn't have their own lab? They rely on the private sector. Do you know that the MECP doesn't have their own lab and they rely on the private sector? Like, does anybody do their homework?
I find a problem with that.
Well, let's see. If I myself have tried to get sampling done, and if you try to get sampling done, and you're working with a private lab that has $1 million contract with the Cyanamid, and they have $1 million contract with the city, and then you come in with $100 sample, is it trustworthy? Are they going to side with the rich people, or are they going to help you? Are they going to do the science blindly, or are they going to go where the money is? Yeah. Now, if you have a government that has their lab, and then you could take it there, and if you're wasting their time, you pay for it. If you're not wasting their time, they fix the problem. We don't have that.
And that's a fair way of dealing with it. In fact, actually, it's not about, yes, it is about wasting time, but what you do is you do your $100 deposit on the spot.
Sure. Right. I believe that if I brought a sample in and said to them, it's a government place, right? I bring a sample in, I ask them to take a sample. I believe that contamination from a company is happening. If I'm wrong, I should have to pay for that. I'm game for that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if I'm right,
but you put your money up front. You get
sure,
a refund. You get a refund if you're right.
I'd be willing to do that 100%, and then costs are always covered that way.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
I
Because obviously, the challenge becomes one of you've got to put the cost up front, because if you don't, you get those people who go, well, I did it in good faith.
No, that's the exact same with the house, right? You get a guy to do the work, and when it's time to pay, nobody ever wants to come from the hip, right?
Well, actually, it's one of the biggest problems in the legal industry is nobody wants to pay. That it's like, isn't that covered by legal aid?
Well,
No.
how many times do you deal with that, Peter? You yourself
Oh,
probably deal with that all the time. They're happy to hire you and get the work done, but when it's
yeah.
time to pay,
Oh, the thing is, this is a problem. We always get what's called a upfront retainer, right? So we don't work for anybody until you pay the money. And you
right,
see, what I hate is, you see, in a way, I hate it obviously when anybody comes into our office, they talk to us for a little while and then they walk away. I hate that when they don't retain us.
right.
Especially if they've got a good case. But what I especially hate is when people come along, and I don't mind if you were to come along to the office and you were to say, here's my case, what do you think? And I say, yep, you've got this and it's going to cost you this much, right? And if you would then say, well, I've got problems with paying you right now, then I'd be saying, well, you can work out a payment plan. And if then it's still problematic, then then I can understand you walking away.
Yeah,
Right? I might not like it because I think you might have a good case, but I understand you walking away.
right.
But what I hate are the people who kind of come in and go, oh, fantastic, I can get this resolved, and then don't pay you a dime, and then you're chasing them for the next 3 weeks.
Yeah, and that's so I understand that part of the government's idea, but our government should have labs. Our
Yeah,
government should have labs to verify that we're being protected, right?
yeah,
Right now, if the private sector's doing it for the corporation, and by the way, the corporation gets to pick what company they want to do the testing.
yeah,
It's not the government that picks the lab. It's the private corporation gets to pick their own lab. Okay? So this the whole thing stinks. And that's the way it's done for the Niagara region. That's the way it's done for the MECP.
well, that's basically Gary is saying the MECP has failed the people of this region. It's easily proven.
100%. I agree. And you could have went to the one city. You were at the city council meeting, Peter, where the consultants that the MECP used were at city council. It was Cytex experts,
Yeah,
and city council ignored them.
yeah, I know, and that was actually the dumbest. That was the dumbest thing, and this was about the possibility of release. And I'm thinking to myself, well, okay, so I might well be 5 or 6 miles away from that potential release point, but if I happen to be here at a particular time, couldn't I be in potential danger?
Yes. And they totally ignored it.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that the chances are, of course, that in any release, if there was, it would dissipate into the air in an even manner, and probably within that boundary that they were talking about, the 2-mile boundary, right? There would probably be, on any given day, on any given release, there will probably be no danger at all.
Well, when they do flaring, that releases more. And the more you
Yeah,
release, it falls to the ground more. That was always the problem when they made smokestacks. They would make the smokestacks higher
yeah,
on anticipating that it would mix with the air. Carbon dioxide would mix with the oxygen, and carbon monoxide would mix with the oxygen and become carbon dioxide. But they would never achieve that because all the contaminants would fall to the ground too soon. So
Yeah.
when flaring happens, those contaminants fall to the ground a lot more, and they do place people in danger, and that's the problem.
And that's where that 2-mile radius came into play on that
Yes, and
particular.
if they would have asked the fire chief, who was sitting right there at every city council meeting, what the evacuation policy is for SciTech if there was ever an explosion, it's 2 miles or more.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, he said he'd have no problem evacuating up to McLeod Road if the wind was in the right direction.
Yeah, and I just thought that whole building scheme that they were putting in was we desperately need that accommodation. We desperately need buildings like that, but we just don't have them in this area. One of the things I want to go through is tomorrow, if we can, Mike, is all the recent developments that we've had in and around Niagara Falls, where not a single spade has gone in the ground.
Yeah.
Or maybe a spade and a half has gone in the ground, but we've got a nice new shiny new pool in the ground.
Yeah, I've been talking to my one buddy that drives cement truck. He's been telling me some interesting things.
Yeah. So, and it's not, Dave basically says, oh, it's about do we have the workers? I believe we do have the workers, right? I believe we have the workers that are ready and out there, to do the work, and I grant that, as with all industries, like we know that, for example, nursing is having a trouble recruiting people. Doctors are having trouble recruiting people. Many of those types of things are having trouble getting people on board. But as far as I'm aware, there's not a huge problem with recruiting tradespeople.
No, but we have a very high shortage of tradespeople. The baby boomers are retiring, and they were all skilled laborers, and you can't replace that skill, and you can't replace that knowledge. And I'm told that a lot of the young people coming in are not very competent.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's an interesting question. Well, that actually is a very interesting question. Competence, is that a part of our education system that's failing them?
100%. They've been taught that computers are the new jobs that are available, and they've totally forgot about skilled laborers, right? So how many people go to high school with the intent of being a plumber or the intent of being an electrician right off the hop, or taught that it's a worthy thing to do, or even a machinist, or these things are great trades. How many people are taking care of that?
Yeah, it bothers me that we kind of channel anybody through our education system. I think we've done, generally in the West, we have a very bad mechanism of identifying talent. Little Johnny, who's in grade 4, he has these, he does these things. We can observe it through the schooling, what little Johnny does, or little Joanne does, or what little Abdul does, right? We can see all of these things as they go through the school system. And teachers should be aware of what is going on with a child, and actually should be able to channel where those creative creative direction, in a reasonable direction.
Yeah, well, we've created something, every level of government has this one word that's really bothering me. It's called red tape, right?
Yeah.
Every government has a different meaning of what the word means. But in cutting red tape, we've gotten rid of guidance counselors.
Yeah.
Guidance counselors used to do what you're saying, Peter. They would observe the child and observe the job situations and say, your child's not really a people person, but he's really good with his hands. We should point him in this direction. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he might be
We
a
used to have
bricklayer.
that. That's taken away now.
Yeah, he might be a bricklayer or a plumber, or he may even be an architect or something.
Yeah, well, you don't know, but we used to sit down with a guidance counselor and even talk to them, and they would weigh how you're looking at life too, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, but that should start at a younger age than, you see. For example, and I know it's a bad example. For example, we all know that back in the Russian school system back in the 60s and 70s, that they kept a beady eye out for those athletes, those would-be champion athletes, or those would-be cosmonauts, or those would be whatever part of the system that they could find, potential army recruits, potential pilots, potential whatever. They had this locked into their system, where they were kind of looking at everything that Johnny did and see the potential for what he could do.
It's a smart thing to do, really.
I'm not saying that we do it down to the nth degree, that, hey, that Mike Cushman, he's going to become an astronaut, when Mike has zero interest in going up, in piloting anything.
You know as well as I do that when you're in high school, to really figure out what you're going to do the rest of your life is pretty difficult.
It is, yeah.
I finished high school and then I started reading. You know what I mean? Like,
well, I finished. Well, it's weird because when I finished, we didn't really have high school. What we had was sixth form colleges. So when I was 16, which would have been year 9 of what the high school system is here, we did our O-level exams, and then we would go on to do college. We'd do our A-levels. And in my O-levels, if I was going to do anything, it was like I fancied doing something to do with geography, history, or the weather. I wanted to be, I thought maybe I'd become a weatherman. Or actually, then the other one was I was good at what was called technical drawing. And because I came from a building background, my dad thought maybe, hey, I'd make a good architect.
Weatherman's the best job in the world, Peter.
Yeah, you can be wrong all the time.
You're totally wrong every day, but here's your 1 week forecast with a smile on my face. It's the I keep telling my grandson, become a weatherman. It's the best job in the world.
I know, but the irony is, if life were as simple as that, eh? But you see, so by the time I was 16, I thought that was my options. When I went to sixth form college at 17, I got hooked on computers. There was my life.
Right.
And then when I got further into my career in computers, I'm thinking, I need to do something else. I can't see this lasting the rest of my life.
Well, I started off as a hammersmith, worked my way into machining while I was doing environmental work on the side, and never paid a dime for that, but it costs more time and money in environmental work than anything else.
Okay, so Randy West says, in high school, a guidance counselor told my parents I couldn't cope with the concept of school and I should look at apprenticeships and trades. I now hold four interprovincial licenses and a multitude of certificates. I've been in management most of my mid to late career. I was approached by Mohawk College to teach trades with them, and then dropped when they found I had only completed grade 9. Ouch! I feel your pain, Randy, because in fact, actually, that is one of those sort of things that they could easily send you to a teaching to a teaching course, and still have you do these particular school, this particular teach this particular course. In fact, I would say not that I didn't particularly like this particular guy, but one of the guys in the one of the woodworking teacher, I didn't get on well with him, but hey, many other kids did. He was probably one of the best teachers in the school because he got on with kids who were into it. I wasn't really into woodworking. That was the reason I didn't get on well with him.
But it sounds like Randy had a guidance counselor that didn't see potential and didn't see a future in anybody, and they also have what you call as mature student, and that's understanding that you don't have the education, but you've gained the skills and knowledge through time, right?
Yeah.
Randy's skills obtained through the years, are highly commendable and shouldn't matter whether he just has a grade 9 or not.
Yeah, and he says he's an OHSA certified trainer. Yeah,
right.
Precisely. There is no sense at all in Randy not teaching those courses. Absolutely no sense at all. In fact, actually, I would say that's exactly the person that should be teaching. I was looking at some of these courses they're teaching, particularly the IT courses they're teaching at this new Niagara, university, and thinking, well, there's some elements of those courses I should be able to teach. I'm not saying all of it, but some of it.
Yeah, and don't forget, to teach something, you also have to have a specific skill of understanding people and how to reach them, right? I know many people with a teacher certificate that don't have that skill at all. So,
well, in fact, actually, that is one of the weirdest things. You probably got your favorite teacher.
You have that one teacher that could touch you and you remember them forever. And those are the guys,
I have, and this individual was our maths teacher, right?
Yeah.
And he was also our form teacher. And his name was Les Milan. He also did football and cross country. So that was the 4 things I remember him for. But he had this unique approach in math class that what he would do, he said one day after seeing how bad people were behaving, he said, as people came into the class, he said, sit down, be quiet. And he gave out everybody a piece of paper. And he said, you're doing your test. And this was a Friday, and everybody go, groan, right? And I did my test, and I was one of the top 4 performing people in the class. And on Monday morning, he locked the door to the classroom. And what happened was he basically changed the entire classroom around. He opened the door at bang on the start time, and he read out the names in an order. He said, you're sitting there, you're sitting there, you're sitting there. So the poorest performers in that maths test were at the front of the classroom. Right? The best performers were at the back of the classroom. And basically every Friday there was a new test, and that would determine where you would sit in the classroom. I was always I was always at the back of the classroom on the top table. Although in all honesty, I hated being at the back of the classroom because I couldn't see the board as well as I wanted.
I was just going to say, how many of the kids that got moved to the front started to learn because they couldn't see?
Well, they were at the back. Many of the kids that were at the back were the ones that were basically just couldn't care.
Yeah.
And it turned out that many of them actually were pretty good at maths. There was one who within 3 weeks was out on the back table, in the back row of the class.
Yeah, it's pretty cool to see teachers that can make a difference in your life. And it's also sad to see the way that the education system is not working today, and nothing being done to fix it.
And the worst of this is actually that I remember coming home one time waving to my mum, "Hey mum, look at this, I got an A in geography. I love geography." Right. And she said, "Let me have a look at it. Let me have a look at it." And she kind of, she kind of started having a look at it, and then very soon reached for this old red pen type thing.
And they
And then
start to pick out the mistakes.
she's scribbling on it. And honestly, now I look back upon it, with knowing where she came from, that A that I got in geography, the only reason I got an A was because I got all the geography elements of it right. If you applied the rules according to her age of education, I wouldn't have got more than a D.
Well, that's like a standard deviation that they do today, right?
Yeah.
Today they do the standard deviation where if the highest mark in the class is an 86 and the lowest mark in the class is a 30, and there's a lot of them below 50, they do a standard deviation and raise everybody up.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, but in fact, that's wrong.
It's very wrong, but that's the way our education system works today. They don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, Peter. Nobody fails, everybody passes.
Yeah.
And we have a system that's enabling poor education, in my mind, because
we never
I have friends that failed classes, and by the time they graduated, they functioned in society very well.
Yeah.
So
we never had held anybody back in our school. We didn't, you didn't repeat year 5 because you failed year 5.
We had people repeat, but like I said, when they graduated from grade 12, they functioned in society very well.
Yeah.
Today, they're very smart people. Had problems learning when you're a child is not out of the ordinary. And a lot of times it's environmental.
Well, in fact, you see, if you go and apply to university, the chances are that they'll want to know how, what your high school grade is, right?
Yeah.
Even though it's 40 years ago that you did high school, but then you find yourself scrabbling around to get some form of high school equivalency system back in place, and you're no longer, and you're kind of, well, why would I need to do that for a year or two just because I want to go to a university course? I've got so much more to offer this university course. One of the things I found that I appreciated about Trios is that they do have a test in there, but that test is basically just a what they call an equivalence test, a high school equivalence test.
Yeah, I've written a lot of those things when I got injured, and the way they treat the injured people, they say, quote unquote, a lot of people are not retrainable.
Yeah, I find that really, I find that odd, and I'll tell you why. Because my brother-in-law was a mechanic. He spent most of his life as a mechanic, but he's a lazy SOB. I'll put that up front, right? He was very much a lazy SOB. He wouldn't work. He would, he basically, if the wrench snacked him on the hand, he'd be offered half a day for sick or something,
Right.
Especially if he was guaranteed to get the money in,
Yeah.
But anyway, so eventually what happened, he was invalided out. But you know what he used to do when he was at home, when he finished his work day? He went home and he would do things on the computer.
So he could do a job.
So he could have done a computer job any day of the week.
Yeah.
He could, I'm not a computer programmer, but he could have been working in an office, putting in accounts or something, or done, typing up reports or something like that. He could have been doing probably even something associated with mechanic business.
Yeah, it's disturbing that we've gone in that direction too, because as soon as somebody gets hurt, they just, cast them aside and next, instead of figuring out.
That's another thing about kind of one of the things that, for example, Angela Brown talks a lot about, is that when it comes to things like ODSP, first of all, it's very difficult to get onto ODSP, or Ontario Works or whatever. The proof that you're actually disabled is mind-blowingly difficult to actually get onto those programs.
Right.
And usually you've got to engage a legal person in order, to fight the battle to get onto one of those programs. And then the problem is, once you're on one of those programs, you're almost a pariah in society.
Yes. And treated as such.
Yeah. And the worst of it is that, for example, take your particular case, when you were invalided out of work, right? Why should you be treated as a pariah in society?
I really find it disgusting.
Yeah.
They gave me an aptitude test, and the girl goes, "Oh, you got an aptitude of a grade 13. You could go to university." Went, "Oh, gee, thanks. I'm so excited." Like, treated me like I'm a total idiot. You know what I mean? And that's when she said, "Well, you don't understand. Most people in factories are not retrainable." And I said to her, well, I really disagree with that statement altogether.
I've never worked in a factory. But I 100% disagree with that statement.
Oh, I couldn't believe that statement. My jaw dropped. Like, so that shows you the apathy she has when she's going in to talk to somebody, Oh, here's another guy that's not going to be able to be retrained. Instead of saying, hey, what are your skills? Let's work with it and figure it out. I told them that they could have sent me for paralegal, and then I'd never have to rely on them for a dime again. But they didn't want to send me for that. They want me to find a minimum wage job.
Yeah. Well, in fact, I think you would make a good paralegal.
I tried. I tried to get them to send me to school for that. And it took me 8.5 years to find a job I could do. I tried 3 different office positions. I couldn't sit that long. I was in so much pain and discomfort. I wasn't sleeping, and I was losing my health. I had to quit the jobs because I just couldn't do them physically or mentally anymore. Right?
I think the best job for you would be actually one of these MECP investigators.
Yeah, I agree.
Except for your advancing age, that would be probably the only thing that I would think would make it difficult for you.
Yeah, as we get older, it's really hard to find work, isn't it?
It's not any disrespect to you. It's just that, hey, we all, when we get up in the morning, the bones ache more as we get older, right?
Oh, that's for sure. Right?
Okay, so Randy basically says circumstances that most often define the path any worker takes. That's true.
Yes.
Yeah, that really is true. In a way, I guess probably what I should have done when I don't know what also there's another aspect that I hated was actually being essentially aged out of my job.
Yeah, you don't feel like you're losing a step. And even if you are losing a step, how much did you contribute to that corporation to make them and get them where they are? And then when you start to lose a step, they just want to cast you aside.
Well, it's not so much that, it wasn't so much that. I was only at that corporation about a year, so They didn't know who the hell I was. But the point being is that because in 2008 it was impossible to get another job. It all happened at the wrong time, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So I went from having regular interviews, probably, let's say, at least 2 or 3 interviews a year, and having a 90 percentile success rate in getting, any job I ever wanted. In fact, 90% of most jobs I ever went for interview for, I turned down.
Right.
Because I was just interviewing because I was testing what the water was like,
Mm-hmm.
and I had a 90% success rate, but yet 90% of them I just didn't want to know. I mean, it's not right for me, not at this time.
Right.
And then another time, what would happen is, so I'd want that job, and hey, now we're talking about money, and I could almost ask what I wanted out of that. And the point being is that one of my former bosses said to me, "Hey, Peter, you probably know that in the industry that I was working in, there's probably less than half a dozen people that know more than I do."
Right.
That's what he said. And yet that doesn't help you when you're 50 and nobody, when you get to 50 and nobody, what the heck ever wants to hire you,
Yeah, my sister went through it in accounting. She, once she got certain age, people wouldn't hire her no more. She's stuck where she is. She can't move on. And it's a shame because her skills are great. Highly skilled in accounting, but because of her age, nobody will even give her a sniff.
Yeah.
So you're right.
And this, that's an ageism thing. So we've got a couple of problems in our society, and this ageism stuff. Well, honestly, before I experienced it, I never actually even, and I heard about people being fired at, 50 years of age. I'm like, no, get over yourself. It doesn't happen.
It happens.
Yeah, and it does.
Yeah, and then it's really hard for that person to find it work somewhere else.
Yeah, and Randy makes the point: at 50, you have an opinion; at 30, you're hungry mouths and rent.
100%.
And the other thing, of course, about it is that at 50, to pay for your salary and your experience, they have to pay you twice as much as the 30-year-old.
Yeah, that's another problem. You deserve the money too. I mean, your experience is going to help that corporation.
Well, yeah, but actually, that's another aspect that drives me insane. Minimum wage. When you think about it, we've got minimum wage, which is basically just slowly bobbling up from the bottom, maybe slightly getting better, a couple of percentage points here and there. And at the same time, we've got an average wage, which is declining. And sometime, I think in the next 10 years, the average wage is going to meet the minimum wage.
Yeah, and then we're in trouble, aren't we?
Yeah, we're in very serious trouble when we don't take care of the workers that we have, that we don't take, and that we don't take care of the workforce that we have, and we don't pay them proper wages.
Well, as you're raising minimum wage to an extraordinary level, how do you now justify, all right, this is a skilled labor job and it pays more? Well,
the whole point about minimum wage was supposed to be
entry level position.
Yeah, exactly. For the 14, 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old that's coming out of school, that is facing their first job, right? That was the job that was supposed to attract minimum wage, not every other job on the planet.
Well, once they've taken away industry jobs, adults started doing those jobs.
Yeah.
And those jobs are now needed by adults.
Yeah, and the problem lies is that you've got places that, like Walmart, that pay minimum wage, and that's their way. They pay minimum wage. They don't even the store manager probably only gets $1 or $2 above minimum wage.
Yes.
right? And that's disgusting if you think about it. There used to be a time when a store manager would probably be paid maybe 3 times what the lowest person would be paid in that store, and that the lowest person in that store wouldn't necessarily be on minimum wage.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to justify taking on so much more responsibility for so little.
Yeah, and how would you be? Why would I become a store manager when I'm paid less than, when I'm maybe paid $20 an hour? Like, why?
Yeah, it
You
wouldn't
know,
make sense. Doesn't make
wouldn't make
sense.
sense. Wouldn't make sense. I've got that responsibility. I'm ordering the goods that my store needs. I'm partaking in management decisions, and you pay me a couple of dollars an hour more than minimum wage. No.
Yeah, my wife's store right now is really having a hard time trying to find management or key holders.
Yeah. Well, okay. Randy makes a point of, in 1992, I hired skilled welders for $11 an hour. Minimum wage was $4.50. Yeah, exactly that. So you were more than twice minimum wage. My wife was hired at $13.50 an hour with minimum wage at $7.50. 14 years later, the minimum wage is only $2 away from her current wage, 18 from 16. Yeah, and that's actually one of the issues about minimum wage. Is you put minimum wage up, there's been many places whereby you've been working in a place for 10 years, and you're great, you're $5 above minimum wage. Be happy about that, celebrate that, and then they put minimum wage up $2.
Well, in 1983,
Your wage doesn't go up.
Yeah. In 1983, I was making $25 an hour plus piecework. And today you won't find a job paying that.
Yeah.
The
Well,
average
that must be in. So basically, at $25 an hour, there was your basic minimum, plus you had, I presume, piecework meant that you got let's say that you had to produce 50 widgets an hour, otherwise, and you'd get paid extra on the 50 widgets and above 50 widgets an hour type thing. Yeah.
Yes. So today you go find a job paying that.
Yeah, they don't exist.
You're hard pressed finding any work like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's,
and even though that very same job that you did back in the day exists today, they're all on minimum wage or maybe $1 or $2 higher.
Yeah, they've totally erased all high wages and skilled labor recognition. Yes.
Yeah.
Basically, in a machine shop, you'll have one setup man, and the rest of the guys will just put a piece in and press the button.
Yeah.
So they've erased the skilled labor part, and the only person that gets paid for the skilled labor is the setup man, and then the rest of the guys just put the part in and hit the green button.
Yeah.
So they've totally figured out ways to erase the skill and not pay for it, and it's a huge problem.
It is a massive problem in our society, and it's leaving, I think, our society in desperate times.
From what I'm understanding about construction, Peter, they don't have skilled laborers for concrete to do anything. Yeah.
You mean to like make these new buildings? By the way, have you seen that new one that went up on McLeod Road, the one where the church was?
Yeah.
That's up in 3 months, isn't it?
It was a prefab building.
That's what I was going to say. They're dropping containers, basically pre-made concrete blocks in there, aren't they?
The whole wall, windows, doors, and everything already made, and just drop it in place. And I'm told they're very well built.
I don't doubt that they are.
Yeah, well, I asked the guy in construction, I said, a prefab building, that kind of makes me scared. He said, actually, they're constructed better than the jobs the other people are doing the old way. He said they're really well built.
So what happens? Are they essentially, what I'm presuming what they've got is like, as they guide the building into place, what they're doing is they're getting like the electric socket points link into place.
Yeah, they got to have some kind of linkage and some kind of setup where it's clicking, right? It's
Yeah. Well, you
it,
drop the building down and somebody's kind of just screwing it in for the last minute, and then, you know, like welding in the, you know, so they're holding the building like this high above the one underneath it, while you've got an electrician connecting the wiring and a plumber connecting the piping.
quite the engineering, eh?
Yeah. Yeah, because honestly, they put that up in 3 months. Unbelievable.
I couldn't believe how fast that building went up.
Yeah. Obviously, they've still got probably a year or two's work inside it.
I believe so, but it's it's still amazing to watch how fast that process worked.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it's just concrete prefab.
That's it.
Yeah. The one good thing about concrete prefab, though, is that, you know, I'm not recommending on that lot that we build it any higher. But the one good thing about concrete prefab is that if you're actually putting them in together properly, that you could. There's probably no limit to how high you could build those.
Yeah, I don't know if it's got an exoskeleton to hold the weight or what, or if the first floor is extra thick. I don't know how they do it.
Yeah, I don't know. But they
like
must have poured. There must have been a concrete pour for the basement.
Oh, yeah, for sure. They got to have a huge base and a strong base to start that for sure.
Yeah,
And
because I've been seeing these homes that they were building in Kenya that were like this. Basically, I didn't see them put any of this new one on McLeod together, but in the one in Kenya, basically what they were doing is YouTube video of it, and what happens is they pick the container piece up, they drop it down, and they've got some guy underneath to fix all the component bits. Boom, drop it into place. The next piece, and they're building these places in, like, you know, they're building a house in like 3 days.
it's crazy, eh?
Yeah.
But I just wonder how many construction jobs it takes away.
Yeah. Well, you see, it's changing the you know, it's changing the focus of that construction industry, isn't it?
100%. No more bricklayers. Like, you're not going to have
Well,
to have.
Again, you may end up with brick, because what you might end up doing is putting a fascia in brick.
Right. But I'm just saying, for the initial construction, you know, you used to have the rebar guys.
Yeah.
You'd have the guys in charge of all the other types of steel that you had to do. And then you'd have your bricklayers and your concrete guys. And like, oh, that's gone now, right? You're building it on site one place and taking it to another and building it.
Well, the worst about that is that the likelihood is that where that original home was built is possibly not even in Ontario. It might even be, you know, it might well be in Mexico.
Yeah, so your work is taken away from the area that it used to get the work. For instance, a hospital right now, right? Hospital's got almost all Toronto workers working there because we don't have the skilled labor here anymore to do the concrete.
Yeah, and that's disgusting.
It's
We've got to train local people.
It's a sign of how big the baby boomers were, how many skilled laborers there were from the baby boomers. And we're all starting to drop off, right? That skilled labor is hard to replace, man.
Well, as a result of what I was talking about earlier on, with me being essentially heave-hoed from my industry at 50, I've got no pension. I've got no choice but to keep working.
It almost seems like it's a plan, eh, Peter?
Well, not that retirement was ever in my vocabulary anyway. You know,
yeah, but
well, I've always held the opinion. You see, one of the first thoughts is, what you see, the first job, when I was working a temporary job, I I started this new temporary job at the summer holidays when I was a kid, right? When I was 16, when I was doing my A levels. This summer holiday job, when I first arrived there, they had this, meeting for this guy who died. He just retired and he died. And it actually troubled me a lot. So I asked a lot about this guy, and he was the life of the party. He was Mr. Everything. Then 2 weeks later, he's dead. Like, why? And somebody jokingly said, yeah, because he couldn't stand the pace of being retired. And I thought to myself, yeah, that's probably true. The guy was a truck driver. One of the things he got as a truck driver is, even if he was, he was going somewhere all the time.
Right.
Even if he wasn't a long distance truck driver, he was a local runs driver, but he was always going somewhere. There was always, he'd see that new building going up on McLeod Road. He'd see that and that would interest him. All right?
Well, retirement doesn't mean you got to stop. You just got to figure out something different within your means that you could do, right?
But for him, it meant he stopped.
Yeah, to take away some people's work, it will kill them.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that I thought about early on in my life, and thought, no, that actually is a problem. Why do we have retirement? But you see, don't get me wrong, I'm not utterly opposed to retirement. I've got many friends who retired when they were 50, but in fact, actually, many of those people that I knew who retired when they were 50 were kind of, were calling me up the next week saying, well, hey, what am I going to do?
Yeah. Well, retiring at 50 is great, but you have to find something to keep your mind going and your body going.
So I basically said to the guy, well, it's not that he didn't have the money coming in. He had tons of money coming in. He was getting like 80% of his salary coming in, and he didn't go anywhere. So I said, why don't you get a job down the local convenience store?
Yep, you got to find something to fill the void.
Yeah, and that's essentially what he did. So he said, he phoned me up later on. He said, yeah, that was actually probably the wisest thing I did. I got this convenience store job. Don't have to think too much about it. I do 4 hours a day. I'm in there at 11 and I'm out by 3, and I'm, it works great for me.
Or you become a crossing guard.
Yeah, we always appreciate our crossing guards. Yeah. All right. Well, it's been great. It's been great this morning. What we're going to do tomorrow morning is I want us to discuss about the, Randy West said I retired into truck driving.
Yeah, a 16-hour day job.
Yeah, I get that. Retiring into truck driving. That's a great one, Randy. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So I think we kind of reached the end of the day anyway. What I want to do tomorrow is let's look at some of those developments that we've had. We've had some pretty spectacular developments approved around Niagara, but yet none of them seem to have gone up. So let's talk about that tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm ready.
I've got some web pages that I can send you, older web pages. Hopefully we can look at some of those. All right.
Yeah, I got some information on a couple of the spots.
Yeah. All right. So we'll be dealing with that tomorrow, folks. So thanks.